StreetPass was one of the 3DS's best features. You'd carry your 3DS around outside and then would see a green light assuming you passed a fellow 3DS user. Many games had small StreetPass features, but none took advantage of it as much as StreetPass Mii Plaza. So what was it that made this game, or rather collection of games, so special? It wasn't necessarily the games on their own, although they were fun in their own right, but it was just the novelty of having a real person's Mii show up on your 3DS. Not only that, but it was someone you passed by in real life. Maybe it was a friend, or maybe it was someone completely random. Maybe it was someone you would never meet, but you would forever be connected by StreetPass. Let's back up and see how this worked. After you boot up the software and go to the gate, you'll be greeted by anyone who came across your path and learn a few things about them, like what state or country they're from, their birthday, and what they've been playing recently, and custom messages after you've already met them. If you're around my age, you played this in middle school and probably got a lot of the same people showing up if you brought your 3DS to school. I vividly remember seeing the same Mii showing up in my Mii Plaza, who I didn't know, only to end up meeting them in real life at a later point and realizing it was them. It was just a really cool way to connect with people. So after you've greeted everyone, you'll go to the plaza itself. There you can see every single person you've ever met via StreetPass, as well as maps to see how many states or countries you've StreetPassed someone from. You also had a calendar so you could see birthdays Miis in your plaza had. Each Mii there would also have their own tags so you could see some info about them, as well as when you tagged them and how many times. If you really want to have an existential crisis, go into your Mii Plaza and see how many Miis have been there for over a decade. That Mii got to your 3DS when you were a kid whose biggest responsibility was homework, and now you work a full-time job paying bills. Yeah, it's depressing. Before I get to the games, I just want to explain StreetPass Mii Plaza a little more to give some background. It launched with a 3DS in 2011, and the original app was pretty basic. It came with a few main features and just 2 games, Puzzle Swap and Find Me, also known as StreetPass Quest. These were Nintendo's proof-of-concept games, and they were surprisingly addicting for being what were essentially bonus features. But Nintendo didn't stop there. In 2013, they released an update that added 4 brand new purchasable games in Mii Force, Flower Town, Warrior's Way, and Monster Manor. This was when the 3DS really started to get more popular, and the Plaza went from a novelty with a couple of minigames to a full-on game platform that encouraged you to go outside, walk around, and constantly check your 3DS like it was a Tamagotchi. Then in 2015, Nintendo had another big update, adding Ultimate Angler and Battleground Z. 2 more games that became pretty popular with fans, and just when you thought they were done, they added 5 more in 2016 with the StreetPass Mii Plaza Premium update. There was Slot Car Rivals, Market Crashers, Ninja Launcher, Feed Me, and Mii Trek. They also upgraded the gate to let you store 100 Miis in line instead of just 10, which was a game changer if you lived in a city or were just around a lot of 3DS owners. But let's start with the first game Nintendo had here, which was Puzzle Swap. Puzzle Swap might seem like a simple concept at first glance, but it was one of the most addicting and universally loved parts of the Mii Plaza. The premise was straightforward: collect puzzle pieces by streetpassing other 3DS users and slowly complete large mosaics of Nintendo-themed artwork. Each puzzle featured iconic characters and franchises from Mario and Zelda to lesser-known titles like Xenoblade or Kid Icarus Uprising. What made it so compelling was that not all pieces were equal. The blue bordered pieces were common and could be traded freely, but the rare pink pieces? You could only get them from people who already had them. And that's where the social aspect kicked in. Maybe someone at school had that one missing corner of the Luigi's Mansion puzzle. Maybe your friend somehow got it from bringing his 3DS to a baseball game because he was a nerd and couldn't go anywhere without it. I vividly remember talking with some friends about this game to try and get some pieces for puzzles I was close to finishing. The excitement of opening the gate and seeing a new Mii carrying the exact piece you needed was just a thrill few modern games can replicate. Puzzle Swap wasn't just a game, it was a miniature social experiment that turned the whole world into your own scavenger hunt. But the true charm was in the payoff. Once you finally completed a puzzle, the image would animate in 3D, and you could tilt your 3DS to admire the scene like a diorama. It felt like unlocking a little piece of Nintendo history, something you earned not through grinding or luck, but through real-world movement and human interaction. Or really near human interaction, I should say, since you could get this by just being near other people and getting lucky. This really showed such a simple game could be so addicting. Find Me was the Plaza's first attempt at turning StreetPass into a full-fledged adventure game. The concept was like an old-school fantasy RPG where your Mii gets kidnapped and locked in a dungeon, and the only way to rescue yourself is by recruiting other Miis you meet in real life to fight on your behalf. Each Mii that showed up could attack enemies or use magic, and their shirt color dictated their powers. It was like an extremely simplified Final Fantasy, except your party was made up of people you knew in real life, as well as random strangers. The real genius of Find Me wasn't in the gameplay itself, but in how it made you crave those daily StreetPasses. You never knew what color you were going to get better what obstacle was coming up next. Maybe you were stuck behind a wall of fog and desperately needed a blue Mii, or maybe a room full of ghosts was wrecking your team and you needed to bring someone in white. I'd be lying if I said I didn't check some of my friends' favorite colors to see if they had what I needed and try to street pass with them. Then there was Find Mii II, which took everything that worked in the original and cranked it up to 11. It added branching paths, more difficult enemies, secret areas, and multiple new endings. You can now use play coins to hire stronger Miis or even call back previous heroes who had already leveled up. The sense of progression felt more meaningful, and the customization options, especially unlocking silly hats, gave you more reason to keep playing. It was one of those games that kept evolving the more you invested in it, and it's still one of the most nostalgic experiences from the 3DS era. I can still remember finally rescuing my Mii after months of slow, steady street passing. And this game was also so popular, it prompted Nintendo to make a full game in Miitopia, which released on the 3DS and then later the Switch. Mii Force was easily one of the most overlooked yet mechanically rich games in the Plaza. It was a side-scrolling classic arcade-style game like Gradius or R-Type, but with a Nintendo twist. Every Mii you street pass turned into a weapon module. Their color determined the weapon type. One might give you a laser, another a homing missile, another a spread shot, and you'd arrange them around your core ship to build the ultimate space blaster. It wasn't just cosmetic either. The arrangement and type of weapons drastically changed how you approached each level. There was a great risk-reward system baked in. If you passed 6 or 7 people that day, you'd be loaded up with firepower and fly through levels in a chaotic storm of lasers and bombs. But if you only passed one, you were probably screwed. I remember so clearly trying to beat up a boss with just one weapon, timing every shot and praying for more Miis tomorrow. Mii Force taught you to appreciate the strength in numbers, not metaphorically, but quite literally. It also featured full level design, upgrades, boss fights, and hidden secrets. And the fact that this was just a bonus game tucked inside a free app is kinda wild in retrospect. It had more content than some full-price mobile games, and for me, Mii Force was just a sleeper hit that made you want to go out and explore. Not just to collect Miis, but to build the perfect loadout for your next mission. When I first saw Flower Town, I didn't think much of it. It seemed like a boring gardening game, but Flower Town was one of the most calming and most meditative experiences the 3DS had to offer. On paper, you can see why I thought it would be boring. You're just a gardener whose goal is to grow and crossbreed every flower species in the land, but once you started, it became weirdly addictive. Each Mii you passed could help pollinate your flowers like a bee, and depending on their own flower's traits, you'd get a brand new hybrid, some common, some incredibly rare. There were over 80 unique species to discover and plenty of decorative planters, landscaping, and furniture to unlock as you level up your garden. What made Flower Town special was a sense of slow, satisfying progression. Unlike the frantic pace of Mii Force or the strategy of Find Mii, this was about patience and planning. You check in each day to water your plants, maybe get lucky with a hybrid, and see your little garden flourish over time. It felt like Animal Crossing in miniature form, like a peaceful, low-pressure world where every street pass was a chance to grow something new. I found myself weirdly attached to certain flower types, trying to complete themed gardens and planning ahead like I was auditioning for HGTV. And for the sake of this video, I actually went to look at my flower garden, and it might not be anything crazy, but it does bring back a lot of memories. And then there was Mr. Mendel, who is likely a reference to Gregor Mendel, who's known as the father of genetics. Also, that I didn't even look up for this video, I just used my own science knowledge for that, so you should totally like the video for that. But anyway, he cheered your progress, gave advice, and generally made you feel like you were doing something meaningful. In addition to all this, there was a mall where you could buy supplies to make your garden better. I seemed to use it a lot as I had like 4 different gardens. Flower Town wasn't flashy and it felt more like an experience than a game, but middle school me loved this game. Warrior's Way was Nintendo's take on military conquest, except instead of managing troops with spreadsheets and war tables, your soldiers were just Miis you walked past at the mall. The basic idea was simple. Every time you got a street pass, that Mii added their soldiers to your growing army. The more people you tagged, the stronger your kingdom became. From there, you set out to conquer other monarchs' territories in what was essentially a giant stylized rock, paper, scissors game. Infantry beats archers, archers beat cavalry, cavalry beats infantry. It was war, but didn't feel too serious. What made Warrior's Way so compelling was the satisfaction of watching your numbers grow. There was nothing like passing someone and seeing your army shoot up by 4,000 troops, or passing another monarch and taking their army over. Because yeah, that was another feature. If there was a monarch, you could choose to greet them peacefully, or you could try to take them over. However, there was nothing more frustrating than walking around all day to get like one tag and gain like 20 soldiers, even 300, because once you have a lot, small numbers like that don't really help. but I guess it does add up. However, the game encouraged long-term commitment. Each new battle required not just strength and Miis, but prediction, trying to guess what unit your opponent would play based on limited information. It added a fun little layer of mind games to what could have been a shallow system. The other surprising element was the customization. As you conquered kingdoms, you'd collect materials to upgrade your castle, giving it flashy designs and new defenses. You could also unlock little bits of lore and collect badges that documented your progress. This honestly is probably my favorite of all the StreetPass Mii Plaza games because I was just addicted to this for the longest time. Monster Manor was arguably the deepest and most atmospheric game in the entire plaza. It combined elements of puzzle solving, dungeon crawling, and RPG gear collection, all with a spooky haunted mansion. Every time you got a street pass, you'd receive a room piece shaped like a Tetris block. You'd then place it on a grid to explore new rooms, find treasure chests, and encounter ghosts or monsters. It wasn't just about laying pieces randomly. Placing similarly colored tiles adjacent to each other created larger rooms with better loot and stronger enemies, so you had to think carefully about every placement. The game had a surprising amount of tension. As you went up each floor, the enemies got harder and more unpredictable. Some of the bosses were genuinely tough, and reaching higher floors without enough room tiles felt like being in a Souls game because it was just so difficult. Every time I booted up this game, I was just wondering, will I get another corner piece, a hallway tile, and just not another L shape. And the setting added so much personality because Monster Manor had this cozy but creepy tone that felt like Luigi's Mansion. This wouldn't be the last time Mii Plaza would have some horror type environment either though. Ultimate Angler somehow turned fishing into one of the most captivating and content-rich experiences in Mii Plaza. The premise was simple, but addicting like so many of these games. Each StreetPass Mii gave you a different type of bait. You used that bait to go fishing islands, each with its own unique fish populations. You started off catching little guppies and crabs, but eventually worked your way up to giant mythical sea monsters that required upgraded rods, special bait combinations, and a bit of luck. Apparently I spent way too much time in this game, but what really sold Ultimate Angler was its loop. You'd head out with a party of Miis, cast your line, reel in some common catches, and hope for a rare find. You could unlock better rods, expand your fishing grounds, and fill out your fish encyclopedia like a Pokédex. And when you finally caught one of those massive legendary fish, some of which took days to even get a nibble, it felt like striking gold. I don't remember the exact fish I got since I haven't touched this game in years before looking back for the script, but I seem to have a decent collection. It wasn't just relaxing, it was engaging. Sort of like Flower Town, the game gave you reasons to keep coming back. New fish, new gear, new islands, plus every single Mii added more to the experience. Their bait choices changed your entire fishing trip. You could go from a peaceful pond to battling a literal sea serpent just because some guy at Walgreens happened to pick squid bait. Ultimate Angler somehow made me excited to fish with complete strangers, and that's a sentence I never thought I'd say unironically. Remember I mentioned there would be another horror game? Well, here it is. Battleground Z dropped you into a small town during a zombie outbreak, and your only hope for survival? Leon Kennedy. Just kidding, it was the hobbies of strangers. Every Mii you passed brought a weapon to the fight based on their favorite activity, like foodies handed you frying pans. The gameplay was a mix of action and strategy where you used these ridiculous tools to fend off zombies in different areas of the town. What made Battleground Z so compelling was its unpredictability. You never knew what kind of weapon you were going to get until you street passed someone, and that meant each run felt different. Yeah, this game was kind of absurd. Underneath all the goofy weapons and these dead that were walking...
Say that again?
There was a surprising amount of depth. Some weapons were better in certain environments, and managing your stamina became key during later levels. The game even had boss fights, cutscenes, and unlockables that kept things interesting. Battleground Z took the idea of StreetPass personalization and just ran with it, turning each encounter into a survival scenario based entirely on the personalities of strangers. It was ridiculous, hilarious, and generally one of the most fun games in the plaza, and definitely one of the most fully developed as an actual game. Slot Car Rivals was surprisingly intense. At first glance, it looked like a stripped-down Mario Kart with tiny toy cars. You race against other Miis on simple plastic tracks, trying to get the fastest time while managing boosts, corners, and gravity-defying loop-de-loops. Once you actually started playing, it was clear this was less about raw speed and more about precision and split-second timing. Your only real control was the throttle, and that one mechanic somehow made or broke your entire race. You had to know when to speed up and, more importantly, when to let go. If you had too much going into a turn, your car would spin out like a Beyblade and you'd lose the lead. Too cautious on a straightaway, good luck catching up. And that's what made it so thrilling. Every single track had a proper way to play, but you had to figure it out. It was more of a pattern to be memorized and mastered than a true racing game. However, what kept me coming back though was the customization. You could unlock different bodies, tires, paint jobs, and even stats for your car. Mixing and matching parts felt like building a tiny street-legal Hot Wheels army, and StreetPassing gave you opponents to race, ghost data to chase, and bragging rights when your Mii finished first. It was part racing sim, part rhythm game, part Mii-powered leaderboard. Slot Cars Rivals didn't get the same Love is Fine Me or Monster Manor, but it absolutely earned its spot in the Plaza lineup. Market Crashers was probably the weirdest of the StreetPass games, which is saying something if you look at some of these games. That's kind of what made it so memorable. This was Nintendo's attempt at a stock trading simulator, except instead of graphs and Bloomberg terminals, you got cartoon Miis shouting financial advice. You'd use tips from StreetPass Miis to decide whether to buy or sell stocks from wacky companies like toy manufacturers or banana moguls. The idea was to invest at the right time and turn a profit before the day's market closed. I wonder how many kids actually became interested in the stock market because of this game. There was a real sense of tension to this game as well. Like, one wrong decision and your portfolio would tank. But what really made Market Crashers special was how it turned StreetPass data into usable gameplay mechanics. A Mii's reaction, whether they were sweating, smiling, or panicking, would help you guess whether a stock would rise or plummet. It was part logic, part guesswork, and part reading facial expressions like you were playing LA Noire. Now, I don't know if this is something Warren Buffett would use to teach, but this also taught you real financial concepts in a simplified way. There was diversification, risk management, supply and demand, and while it was wrapped in a more friendly style, there was something kind of brilliant about giving kids a crash course in economics just by having them pass their friends at school. It was a weird game, but it actually could have benefited many kids in real life, thinking since they're the wolf of Mii Plaza, they could get rich from the stock market. And while not as easily said as done, it's still important to invest in stocks through a personal trading account or Roth IRAs. Keeping the money in a bank account will get it maybe a few extra cents a year compared to what you can make from investing. I really wish I had a sponsor that I could tie into this, but anyway, moving on before I get more sidetracked. Feed Me was one of those games that sounded bizarre on paper, but totally clicked once you played it. You ran a fantasy-themed restaurant for adventurers, they'd come in after a long day of fighting dragons, and your job was to cook them meals based on the ingredients StreetPass Mii's brought with them. Think Diner Dash, but with more goblins. You had to decide what to make based on what you had in stock, who was ordering, and what kind of stats they needed boosted. It was part cooking sim, part RPG, part time management game. The best part was that it rewarded experimentation. Some dishes were obvious, meat and spice equals spicy stew, but others felt like culinary puzzles. Could you make a meal that boosted defense and speed? What would happen if you combine a mushroom with a mana herb? There were hundreds of ingredients and recipes, and discovering a new one felt like solving a riddle. There was a legitimate thrill in throwing together a weird combo and watching the knights enjoy it as their stats skyrocketed. On top of all that, it was genuinely charming. The adventurers had personalities, the kitchen felt alive, and the idea that some stranger's Mii helped you discover a new dish made every meal feel like a community effort. It turned StreetPass into a culinary co-op. Feed Me may not have had flashy combat or loot, but it had flavor, literally and figuratively, and it was one of the games that made me grin every time I booted it up. Wasn't my favorite game in the Mii Plaza, but I'm glad that it existed. Ninja Launcher is probably the most purely chaotic game in the Plaza lineup, and I mean that in the best possible way. The premise, you load your Mii into a giant slingshot, or cannon depending on how you look at it, and launch yourself at targets, bouncing off walls and collecting coins along the way. Every Mii you StreetPassed gave you more power, better trajectory angles, and extra abilities. The more Miis you had, the further and faster you could fly. It was like Angry Birds meets Trampoline Park, with yourself as the projectile. There was no deep strategy here, no stats to juggle or enemies to outwit, just good old-fashioned physics, ma'am. You had to angle your launch perfectly, hit targets midair, and ricochet into bonus areas before slamming into the ground. Some levels were filled with hazards and bounce pads you say, that made your path unpredictable, and I can't count the number of times I almost rage quit as I narrowly missed the last ring or flew past the finish line entirely. It was infuriating, but it was also kind of funny. What made Ninja Launcher so satisfying was the sheer joy of motion. Like, watching me rocket through the sky just never got old. And when you had a full team of StreetPass Miis, you felt unstoppable. You were a ninja getting launched. I guess you could say this is a Ninja Launcher.
Say that again?
And this game didn't try to be anything more than just pure fun, and honestly, this was perfect. Not every game needed a story arc. Sometimes you just want to launch yourself into space and see what happens. And the last game in StreetPass Mii Plaza is Mii Trek. Felt like a charming little Indiana Jones simulator. You played as an explorer venturing deep into uncharted jungles, accompanied by Miis you StreetPass who acted as your teammates. Each Mii added stamina, tools, or supplies, and together you'd travel across a grid of wilderness, collecting rare artifacts, dodging hazards, and charting new areas. The more Miis you had, the further you could go, and the further you went, the more challenging the journey became. Every trek was a new puzzle. You had to choose routes carefully, avoiding poisonous plants, rock slides, or animal attacks while balancing how far your supplies would get you. Sometimes you'd risk taking a long detour to grab a rare relic, only to come up short and get booted back to camp. It added just enough tension to make every decision matter, and the artifact collection side of things scratched the same itch as filling a Pokédex. Plus, you could display your finds in a museum-like setting, which gave your progress a nice sense of performance. But more than anything, Mii Trek was about exploration. It took the randomness of StreetPass and turned it into an adventure of discovery. You never knew who you were going to meet or how far you'd make it that day, and every artifact found, every new trail blazed, it was all because of the people you passed in real life. It was one of the final games released for the Plaza, and in many ways it felt like the perfect send-off. Brand journey powered entirely by strangers. StreetPass Mii Plaza probably will never come back in any form, and that's pretty sad. Such simple games created so many memories for so many people. Even if it did come back, I don't think it would be the same for many of us who are adults now, but the younger generation should still get a chance to have something like this. Switch 2 is still very much portable and could easily have a StreetPass feature added. It wouldn't have the iconic green light, but could still have one on the app icon. Since I got my Switch 2 over a month ago, I have not brought it out of my house even once since day one. If there was a StreetPass feature, I probably would a lot more. Nintendo had hot zones at certain restaurants like McDonald's where you would get StreetPass by the last few 3DSs that were there, and that was just a cool feature to encourage people to go to certain places. So this could be brought back to really bring that exciting element of carrying your console around with you. However, even if it never does come back, we'll always have our experiences with StreetPass Mii Plaza. If you enjoyed this, liking, subscribing, and commenting would be really appreciated. Let me know your favorite StreetPass Mii Plaza game, and I've also made more videos like this going over nostalgia games like Nintendo Badgercade and Rusty's Real Deal Baseball, so be sure to check those out. Thank you for watching Domainy, and I'll see you next time.